they get the chance. They were born in bloody circumstance. To go, leave me, run like you've never run before. A voice from the underground, given room to breathe, not puppy drowned. So die if you get the chance. Better men than you've been, let this dance. To go, leave me, run like you've never run before. I have seen the worst, and there is nothing left for me to hate, so I can lay me down, my brothers, on the ground. I bled today until Coyote comes to raise me up and carries me away. To go, leave me, run like you never did. No, believe me, run like you've never run before.
Hello, welcome to the Scottish Rugby podcast brought to you by the Scottish Rugby blog for the final time of the 2023-24 season. I am Jonny McGinty. Good evening. If you're watching live, hello if you're not. We are going to quickly go through a little bit of news this week, and then we have got our season review. We'll look through both pro teams and all the teams in the Scotland setup. We'll talk about the good points, the bad points, the what to take forwards and the what to work ons of all the Scottish sides, and have a think about where we think they might go next season. So joining me for that tonight are Rory Baldwin. Hello, Rory.
Hello.
And Ian Hay. Hello, Mr. Hay.
Hello, I've just noticed I've got really bad signal, so I'm just trying to hotspot now. You might lose me for a second in your dreams. But no, hello everyone.
We'll soldier on without Ian, don't worry, we'll be fine. Very quickly through the news. I feel like this is news that we should have probably saved until Mr. Manson was with us, but I think we probably need to talk about it today. Club stalwart Chris Dean is away from Edinburgh. Rory, is he going to be a big loss for Edinburgh next season, do you think?
I mean, like, proper Edinburgh fans will probably castigate me for this, but I think that with the signing of young Tuipulotu, he may not be quite so badly missed. I mean, he's got 100 caps, so he's obviously been, a faithful servant to the club. But I think the fact that he never really kicked on to international honours suggests that they probably do need to try and move on and rejuvenate that midfield a bit.
Ian, do you think Chris Dean was someone who maybe in another time had potential to ever make it as an international player, or do you think he was an Edinburgh legend and that was, and this isn't a knock on him because because I think we know plenty of players like this, but do you think Edinburgh legend, top contributor in the URC games, had some big European moments with Edinburgh? Do you think that was the ceiling for Christine, or do you think he's a case of wrong place, wrong time with the logjam of centres that Scotland have had?
Yeah, I remember like when the last North American tour when Jamie Ritchie went, was that 2018? Yes, 2018. I was asked, Cammy asked me for bolters for the squad, and I'd said Ritchie and also Christine because I quite liked his, pretty direct style of play. I do think he was. I think he was in a couple of training squads, wasn't he? And I'm probably the only member of the West Coast-based Christine fan club. I think he's a pretty good player. I like his simple methods. No, but great innings for Edinburgh. Like you said, when he's when the big boys are away, he was always there to anchor things. I think he was maybe a little bit harshly dealt with. I think he should maybe be given a chance at international level. But like you said, it's been a rotation of good quality players during that time. So yeah, it's a wee bit unfortunate. But best of luck to him.
He's leaving. Mutual consent, he's leaving, Rory. So do we think that means Japan or France for Christine next season?
Well, he says they said it was mutual, which doesn't always mean mutual in Scottish rugby circles. But he's off for a new challenge, which, given that he spent so long at Edinburgh, everything's a new challenge from there. But I'm not sure. Maybe Greg Laidlaw will sign him.
Well, do you know what? We'll move on to that next then, because we have got two more pieces of news to cover. But the next one, as Rory sort of teased there a little bit, is that Greg Laidlaw becomes yet another Scottish head coach, and he's head coach at we'll get this wrong, Arias D Rocks in Japan. Iain, what do we think? Is he the sort of person that we could see coming through the ranks and coming back into the system in Scotland?
If we're lucky, because we've maybe lost a couple, I think everyone he's related to. Also, I'm not sure about that pronunciation either. I only just looked it up. Orasayo. I've even watched Shogun of late, so I should know these things.
So have I, but yeah.
Yeah.
Don't know if it's helpful.
I mean, he was a bit of a tactical master on the pitch, wasn't he? He wasn't graced with great speed or physical attributes, so it was all up here, and he was excellent at that. So I think he'll pass on a wealth of knowledge. And, if things go well, maybe he can come back over here. I'd love to see that. I even wondered. When he moved over to Japan, or when it was announced. It was during COVID time, and Cammy had texted me. He was like, "Iain, are you able to interview Greg Laidlaw today?" I woke up and saw this like 10:30. I was like, "Oh, hello. I will be now." Yeah. And I think I'd even asked then, like, what was the plan? But no, obviously his family settled very well there. And like I said, he's a great rugby mind. So I think he'll excel. I've been wrong before. Great players have been bad coaches, but he doesn't seem like the type who will be a sort of cockerel-like dog, dictator. I think he'll be open to listening to players, and like I said, he's just recently retired, so he knows the game inside out as it's played nowadays.
So, to put you on the spot then, Rory, the first Laidlaw to make their way back into some sort of coaching setup in Scotland, Greg from Japan or Clark from New Zealand?
I would say Clark, because he's been doing it a wee bit longer and he has a massively higher pedigree at it so far. So yeah, I would say probably Clark. Whether he fancies it or not, I don't know, because he's he's getting the top pick of jobs in New Zealand, having done the sevens there and the Super Rugby sides. So yeah, be interesting to see if he actually fancies it. Does he? Maybe Greg will talk him around, and they'll come back as a dream team or something.
I think Grieg's possibly a little bit still a little bit more entrenched in the Scottish rugby system than Clark is. I think that maybe gives him the edge if something comes up that he does fancy. He didn't retire from the international team that long ago. He's still got some close pals that are playing. I could see if a job came up that he fancied that he might be able to get his foot in. But I think, like you say, Clark's the one with the pedigree. So does he want to come is the question. Final bit of news then before we get on to the season review of all of Scottish rugby this year. Our WXV2 squad announced for the games down in South Africa. The women's team, and I think we might touch on this in a minute, Iain, probably one of the more settled setups. How do we think the WXV2 squad looks? Any major surprises, anything that stands out to you?
There are 5 uncapped players, but like you said, it's because we don't have that strength and depth yet, which will hopefully come. It's kind of, you don't want to say horses for courses, especially not with Charlotte Dujardin around. Hey, sorry. No, it's a settled squad with a couple of new people coming through. I don't really have much to add to that, I'm afraid. No, we're just stepping up a level. Obviously, WXV2, we won our version of the last trophy. Hopefully, we can kick on, but there's that sort of major imbalance, isn't there? There's like England, New Zealand, so miles ahead of everyone, then sort of like France, Australia. And then kind of afters. So it's obviously great. Good competitive action for them, and especially for the new players coming into the squad, it means they get, you don't want to say a higher level of coaching, but it'll be a more intense level with very good players, and they'll obviously learn new things. Which seems very cliche.
Looking friendlies as well, Rory. Yeah, it was a very press answer, Ian. Some really tasty friendlies at the Hive as well before they head down to South Africa.
Yeah, good to see them getting some
an exciting one.
Some autumn international kind of, I guess their version of those. Yeah, I mean, I think they'll be targeting the WXV2 for a win. You've got to think, defend the title would do them the world of good heading into next year's Six Nations, where they probably were just a little bit in the big games where we thought they might have more of a chance than they did in the end. It would be good to see them pushing them to the top of that table again. I mean, yeah, there's 35 in the squad at the moment. That'll be cut down to 30 before the tournament. But yeah, good to see some of the under 20s get a shot. Good to see Jade Conkle back as well, Jenny Maxwell, and yeah, the finest name in rugby, Holland Bogan's getting a chance too.
Okay, I think we're pretty much done for the news. It's very much light rugby news season. We might, as we go on, touch a little bit on the Olympic sevens, but I think we'll move on. Like I mentioned earlier, this is our last pod of the season, so there'll be a little bit of a break from public pods after this. We will continue, hopefully, to put some Patreon content out for the barren month of August. Might not be necessarily rugby related because there's no rugby to talk about, but we will find something for you. If you are not yet a Patreon and you are interested, it is patreon.com/Scottish Rugby blog, no, Scottish Rugby podcast. And for the price of a Starbucks ham and cheese croissant, which is what I had for my breakfast this morning, or if you're me, 2, because they gave me 2 and only charged me for 1, you can get access to a couple of extra episodes, a little bit of extra content every week, and also access to our super secret Facebook group where we've asked tonight for some input on the season review that we'll be doing. So I think what we'll do is, and this isn't just because Manson's not here, we'll go in order of when everyone's seasons ended, which means we will start with Edinburgh. We'll talk about
the light on begin to there.
we'll talk about highs probably quite quickly for Edinburgh, lows, what was going well this season, and what we'll be hoping to see change next season. We'll try and stick to that format for all the teams. Rory, you're the most tangentially Edinburgh here. Kick us off. What went well for Edinburgh this year? What were the highs of the season?
I would say I'm probably Edinburgh adjacent would be the best thing. Craig likes to co-op me just to as backup, but yeah, I mean, I didn't see that much of them this year. Highs, goodness, I'm on the spot now. Christine got 100 caps.
WPL got 200, 300.
They signed Ross Thompson. That's not really a high, is it? They must have done something.
Rory, you're lucky he's not here.
I know. This
I
is the
think,
thing.
Ian, I think what Rory's probably trying to say, Ian, is that, and I'm sure we've said this before, but we'll hash it out for the last time this year in the hope that we're talking about something different next year.
Mhm.
Disappointing season for Edinburgh once again.
Yes, in terms of personnel they have, but what we will, and check me out defending Edinburgh here, all of you whiners. It's very much a season of transition with new head coach coming in. Obviously changes like losing Scott Steele. Changes at halfback, but obviously Ben Healy came in as the sort of big name 10. He's going to be the starting guy now. Not really fired, although he has, I think, he second in the most minutes played in the URC, and I think kicked most points. It's more of a
top point scorer of the season, Ben Healy.
Yeah, but it's more kind of because he had to, because the cupboard is very bare. I mean, let's not forget they were. This thing, they were one result away from getting to the playoffs, and then they get spanked. Like, it was a really, really dreadful performance. They had some decent performances, but I think it, like I said, I say that the highlights of the season would be the emergence of Harry Patterson and Matt Curry, and they've had to deal without Darcy Graham for, I think, like all of the season, if not maybe like a week or two he was available. Losing Kinghorn, obviously we felt there was a sort of logjam in the back three with Buffelli, Kinghorn, Doohan, Darcy. Then Kinghorn was away, and Buffelli and Darcy both had injury issues. But Patterson and Curry coming through has been encouraging. I don't know what else. I guess think you and Ashton has
right.
You could say
I'll
that.
try this on for size, all right?
Right.
For Edinburgh, what we want to see more of, what went well this year, what we want to see more of from Edinburgh next season. There are the beginnings of a bit of a club culture at Edinburgh. Edinburgh played better. I wouldn't say well. Edinburgh played better a lot of the time in second half this season, and a lot of the time when they were under the pump and struggling, they managed to it seemed like find something from somewhere. So I was at their game against Scarlets. That must have been March time. And they were getting run ragged by an absolutely generationally dire Scarlets team in the first half. And whatever happened at halftime, they came out and they looked like a side that should have put 40 points on Scarlets, because they are a side that should have put 40 points on Scarlets. So I think there is something there where there is the beginnings of a culture, the beginnings of a team spirit. And I think what they need to do next season is they need to kind of cultivate that a little bit more. They need to come out playing that way and not just let themselves get behind to these really, really terrible teams and end up having to scrape it out. So, yeah, for me, I think what you say is right, Ian. I think it is a season of transition for Edinburgh. And I think you can kind of start to see what they want to look like after this transition is finished, and they probably need to speed that up a little bit and get themselves into that place. Rory, is there anything else where you think that we need to see from Edinburgh next year?
Yeah, I mean, it was something that basically every time we talked about Edinburgh on the pod that I've been on it the last kind of 6 months, it's been get some shape to their attack. That may help with some of the new signings. Get a bit more of a sort of, I guess, like a style. It doesn't have to be a stylish style, but at least like a way that they want to play that is kind of clear to see. Because they've got a pretty banging squad. They shouldn't be squandering it.
As well as the highest point scorer, they had the turnover king. Jamie Ritchie is rebounded after the loss of the Scotland captaincy by going full Jamie Ritchie. Of course, they're going to lose Bill Mata this year, but Magnus Bradbury's coming back up. I mean, their squad is still going to be strong. It's just you feel like they kind of want to play a power game with the kind of guys they have, like Scuman's because you're going to carry all day for you. Replacing Nell will be interesting.
Mm-hmm.
But it's one of these. We still don't know how they want to play. But
I think when we get on to Scotland, we'll obviously we'll touch slightly on the summer tour, and I think we'll probably have something to say based on these last 4 games on the person who Edinburgh thought was the replacement for WPL and how that might go. Perfect time for the arrival of Mr. John Anderson, because we will move on from Edinburgh down the road.
John Bowie, just so you know, I've added you to stage there, but Johnny McGinty told me previously that you can add yourself. So if you're waiting in the green room again like that, you can just hover over yourself. You just wanting to?
I wanted to grab the entrance.
He wanted to keep his mouth shut when we talked about Edinburgh. I prefer not to speak. Jose Mourinho memes, John.
Do you know, there was a moment. Hey, moved on.
We're finished with Edinburgh.
You must be being nice about them.
We'll move along the Emmy. John, I'm going to throw you the softest of softballs to get you back in. Glasgow, tell me the highlight of the season for Glasgow.
I mean, it was definitely when we put away Zebra at home. That was a good day. Tough. Do you know what? Yeah, it's those games. Those games you've got to win. You've got to win them. I mean, it's softest of softest. The playoffs. I mean, obviously the final was just the most incredible experience to watch and be a fan for. But when you put that on top of that semi-final as well, it's just mind-blowing how good a week that was as a Glasgow fan. So, and I talked even during the season that I didn't think we necessarily had it in us to do that or get there. Aye, magnificent. So yeah, we're still buzzing, still bouncing.
Right, in the absence of Manson, I tried to be as level as I could about Edinburgh. I will take if there was a low for Glasgow, and bearing in mind we are talking about the team that are URC champions this year. I think we were all quite vocal about it in the run-up to the playoffs, and I think just because Glasgow won, we probably can't just decide that we don't care about it anymore. I think we do have to talk about the fact that playoff run, as incredible as it was, and like John says, as great as it was to watch and be even a part of as a fan, it should have been a lot easier for Glasgow than it was, and that wobble the last 3-4 weeks of the season with the South Africa trip and the way things went in the Bulls and particularly the Lions game. I think if there is anything, Rory, that Glasgow want to work on next season, obviously they showed that they have the mental strength, because particularly the last 10 minutes of the final showed the sort of fortitude that we've not really seen from any Scottish team in a very long time. But it hasn't been there all season. Is that something you think maybe that's the one work on for Glasgow next year?
Yeah, I mean, I think having won the league in possibly the hardest manner possible, the next step up would be to try and win it again in a slightly, I guess, it's not going to be an easy league to win, especially now the South Africans are paying attention. But in a more straightforward route, possibly with a home final, home semi-final. So yeah, they're going to need to be aware of. Yeah, the season is long, but if you switch off at the start or in the middle, it'll cost you come the end of the tournament. So, I think they'll want to sharpen up on that a bit. It'd be interesting to see how Adam Hastings goes as well. He has the kind of the style to fit right into that style of attack, and now that Donkey Weir's become a full-time pundit, and RT10 is along the road in Edinburgh, leading them to glory. It'll be interesting to see how he can marshal that, the riches that he kind of has at his disposal in the backs.
Yeah. So Iain, obviously being URC champions is something that Glasgow can hang their hats on. That was a serious achievement this year. We do probably want to see them back it up and show that they could be switched on and that they could be ruthless for the whole season. What was it about the performances this year you think that got Glasgow to where they are? What are they taking on next season? What if mental fortitude is going to improve a little bit, and if that's what we're saying is the one change we're looking for, what's staying the same? What's going to keep Glasgow going into another URC championship?
I remember when Gregor Townsend took over the Scotland job, he said about playing the fastest rugby in the world. I think that's what Glasgow are doing right now. It's just they play with such speed and attack, it just doesn't give people time to realign themselves. And everyone, they're playing with such confidence. Every single one of them, like obviously Huey Pilotu are now the sort of national team standard. But then guys like Staff McDowell, who was he like coaches player of the year, they come in. Josh Mackay's been excellent. Kyle Rowe, who we were sort of looking at as a sort of bit part squad member, he's been outstanding this season. Did not equal sort of number of tries scored by a winger or a back three by any Warriors player this season. But obviously now they've got the target on their back. So it's about maintaining a level of performance is going to be very difficult, but we've seen consistency throughout them and rotations. There's real strength and depth, particularly in the back row. I've already mentioned the centres. So I think the next thing is we just need to. My slight concern is, Richie Gray's getting on a bit, but then we've had Gregor Brown, Max Williamson coming in. It's just making sure that these aren't one-season wonders. Like I said, targets on the back now. They're the hunted men. The prey has become the predator has become prey. So just I don't know. It's like it almost seems like the perfect season, but obviously no season's perfect. Like you said, with those wee blip. Sometimes we need to be smarter and play tournament rugby. I think we should have beaten Harlequins in Europe. Maybe then the only other games we lost at home were like against Northampton, who ended up winning the English Premiership. So it was a very, very good season. And we
so more success in Europe, you think, Iain, and keep the strength and depth going and be
keep the nucleus of the squad.
Is that how Glasgow do it to push on this year? Because I think to be honest,
John,
the nice thing about Glasgow is that this year was better than last year, and last year was better than the year before. Glasgow seem to be a team that are growing and growing. So, John, in a perfect world, if I was to give you the option, do Glasgow repeat the URC or do they go much deeper into the Champions Cup this year?
Yeah, I think the achievement of repeating the URC would be I think that would be the thing that would solidify, because I think we've won a title before, and we certainly didn't back that up with a pretty ghastly season the year after. So I think backing up that position, it's all fine and well being there or thereabouts and improving every year, but once you reach the top, you do have to kind of stay there. And I think Glasgow have recruited quite well, actually, in terms of talking about squad depth. Certainly in the forwards, it's going to be a wee bit of a shake-up at the front. Some new guys coming in, some very experienced campaigners as well coming in, who, I think with Glasgow, we've been lucky that, you touched on Hastings, Rory Sutherland coming in as well. If these guys stay fit, these are, potentially very, very, very talented players who Glasgow couldn't afford if they hadn't had their injury problems and hadn't had their situation. So, a good 10 doesn't come cheap. And Adam Hastings, when fit, is bordering a world-class 10. He's exceptional. So we're very lucky if we can get these guys fit. That'll, that's going to push Glasgow on massively. But yeah, I would happily take a URC repeat. I don't even know if I would take it, an easier URC repeat. Just backing it up, going deep into the tournament again, making sure we can. And I think from my perspective, it's probably more about how we're playing as well, and the progression under Franco Smith, seeing the way the game plan. It feels like we're watching Glasgow play rugby again, and that's probably more important than winning tournaments and going deep in Europe. But seeing Glasgow play rugby and actually sitting watching it and with a big smile again, because that certainly wasn't the case for a few years.
Yeah.
Do you think they should start kicking goals?
Goal kicking?
No,
oh,
absolutely not.
Nah, okay. Corners.
No,
corner, mate.
We've done the good, we've done the bad. I think we'll move on to what was sadly the ugly quite a lot of the time this year, and have a look at the national setup. We'll start, John, with arguably the ugliest. It's picked itself up a little bit over the last couple of weeks with 3 very, very convincing wins, and then a couple of nice knockout game wins to get back into the World Championship. But the under-20s Six Nations was not great. Are we as worried now as we were at the end of the Six Nations about the pathways in Scotland, the way the under-20s are going?
I think we absolutely have to be, but I think we need to treat pathways in the pragmatic way that, it's always all doom and gloom because we're like, our under-20s are getting horsed. And I think the standard of this under-20s group as a whole, I think they're up against some very talented youngsters from across the world. Under-20s doesn't always translate to just because you're amazing. Obviously the French under-20s team was a different, they were different gravy, and they have turned out to be all world-class players. But for the most part, that doesn't necessarily happen. And I think we should be worried that we're not producing young players in Scotland. But I think it's clear to me our focus is not necessarily on picking the best and the brightest that play in Glasgow, play in Edinburgh, play in Aberdeen. It's about understanding who we've got worldwide, and obviously the English part of that, players that are eligible down in English clubs, English universities, Welsh clubs, Welsh universities, and even further afield. That's going to always be an important part of our youth development situation. And I don't necessarily. I think that's only going to become more important because the money isn't there. So the money is not there to throw at grassroots clubs and say quadruple your playing numbers, and that's not reality anymore. Rugby clubs are not going to be growing in size necessarily that easily anymore. So I think we have to be creative with what we do. But the 20s getting horsed is always a problem. But I was surprised to see how they bounced back. Actually, that showed a lot, and I think seeing some of the boys that have played 20s a few years ago who were part of teams that also got horsed, then stepping up to the pro teams and actually looking very talented. I think that says everything that, the 20s, let's not put too much on the 20s, I guess, is the short way of saying this long story.
Yeah, and I think, Gregor Townsend talked after the end of the URC about how important it was for the setup outside of Glasgow, that there are now a bunch of Glasgow players in the Scotland setup that know how to win,
Yeah.
which, that's something that the 20s have now experienced through winning the under-20s World Championship that they were part of the other month. Iain, the one national team that does know how to win, and you touched on it earlier, is the women are defending WXV2 this year. WXV2 performance last year was great. Some really big wins against, some quite evenly matched teams. A nice little bit of a trophy tour. They brought the WXV2 trophy around some clubs, and they brought it to Edinburgh and Glasgow and things. That translated relatively well in the Six Nations, much closer against France than they have been in a while. Still a way off of England, but a couple of quite serious looking victories in the Six Nations, and a Wales game where they did look like the women looked like the one team in the Scottish national setup that knew how to defend a win and knew how to grind out and knew how to win things. Are we hoping, Iain, that's going to continue this year and that Six Nations play is going to improve again and we're going to repeat WXV2?
I remember when we discussed the Six Nations, the Women's Six Nations campaign at the end of it, we were a bit disappointed because we hadn't really pushed on, especially in an attacking sense. We look at the quality backline strikers we have, the likes of Emma or Rona Lloyd, Chloe Rory. I feel we're a bit stagnant. WXV2 last year, I felt a bit like the under-20s. We were the more fancied team, but we don't seem to be able to grind results out in Six Nations. Is my main concern. Goal kicking, as I've mentioned, is an issue. Like I said, I feel we're a bit stagnant, and I just hope we've not plateaued. I think we talked there earlier about the squad, how there's only 5 uncapped new players in the entire squad, and we are getting sort of horses thing. Some of them are. Some are peaking, some are getting towards the end of their careers. It's a bit of a difficult thing. I just think we need a bit of a fresh injection of someone like Meryl Smith at 10, or somebody who's a bit more creative, because we just seem a bit placid and look like the only way that we're going to score is utilising our great defence and score off turnover. That seems to be the only way that we look like scoring. If we're in possession, and a lot of teams are so much more comfortable in defence now, that's where you get a good team turning into a great team. So we need a wee bit more zapping.
Rory, we've always kind of graded ourselves on a curve in the Six Nations, and obviously you're looking at England and France have traditionally been a much more serious organisation, a much more professional setup. To be blunt about it, treated their players a lot better than everybody else, and we've been happy with close to them or a couple of things from an England performance that we could take away. Is Iain right? Do you think it's time we stop doing that and we think this is a team that should be kicking on and competing in those games, or are we happy to say we are getting better against teams that are a level up from us?
Absolutely. The England game was a kind of, it was an outlier. Everyone was getting battered by them, but I think that France game was the one I was actually at, and there were probably up to about an hour there. I thought that game was there for the taking. The Ireland game at the end, they narrowly lost that. That would have given them a third place spot. So they weren't that far away this year, and you probably learn slightly more by. You probably learn more by being competitive and losing than just getting hammered. You probably don't learn that much getting hammered. But I think in if you're close to a game that you feel you could have won, and you figure out the ways that slipped out of your hands, I'm sure they've done a lot of reviewing of it. I think the fact that Fraser Brown's being brought on as an assistant coach kind of shows that they're starting to take the coaching setup a bit more seriously as well. It's sort of guys that you could have quite easily seen him probably getting an assistant's job with one of the pro teams or in the Scotland setup. I'm not suggesting that he's necessarily that level of coach yet, but that sort of thing still happens in SRU Towers, and I think to see him being put to work to help the women's team is a good sign that they're taking that a bit more seriously, because there's a huge market there, as we've obviously seen with the women's sevens this week. There's huge interest in women's rugby at the moment, and it'll be great to see if they can hopefully retain the WXV2 and then kick on in the Six Nations.
Right, we'll finish the pod and the season with a team whose competitive season this year started 363 days before it finished, and I think we could say quite fairly, I think probably flattered to deceive on two quite major occasions in that 363-day period. Ian, we've got a World Cup and a Six Nations to look at for the Scotland men's team, where, we didn't expect a huge amount from the World Cup, but I think we maybe expected a little bit more in those two games than we got. I think it's probably, if we're being honest, we expected more from the Six Nations than we got. Do you think that the senior men's team was a letdown this season, or is that sort of the level now that Scotland are at?
I think it's kind of a bit of both, because we kind of we hoped this wouldn't happen, but it did. I think it really just confirmed our place in the pecking order. Obviously, Scotland, the World Cup was going to be it was a nightmare draw, wasn't it? It was the worst potential draw. And I don't think, the Ireland game we were going to lose anyway, but then I don't think Nick Berry helped by giving them 2 tries, which were sketchy. And in the Six Nations, we looked like we were about to destroy Wales and then nearly tossed it in. But again, there was some interesting officiating. And then the rest of the time, it's like we kind of expect. I know this sounds like the most arrogant thing of all time, but it's great that over the last 3 years it's switched to people go, I expect to beat England now. They're easy. So we kind of seem to be where we are. It's like same with the women's team. We're at this sort of almost plateaued level. And how do we kick on? I think with the women's team, it needs a bit more creativity and clinical finishing once you get opportunities at 22. The men's team, it's basically more viciousness, being a bit more savvy and managing to get results against, your Irelands and, mainly Ireland, especially, we're not beating them in ages. They seem to be our bogey team. With the women's team, England and France are miles ahead. We can't realistically expect to challenge them. But sometimes we feel like we're close to beat Ireland, and then other times we just get absolutely embarrassed.
Usually right before we play them is when we feel it's close. It's off the pitch, very close to beating them. But
so it's just
right, John,
same old.
You could finish us, John Anderson, on your return on a little bit of a positive note. We'll do the same thing we did with Edinburgh and Glasgow for the men's team going into the Six Nations and the Autumn Internationals this year. What did Scotland do well this year? What can we expect to see them taking forward? What's the thing we can hang our hat on and say we'll start from here and this is how we'll get better?
I think we've replaced a lot of the old guard in the back row. We've now got real competition in the back row. I think the backs almost pick themselves as well. So there is a real consistency to selection now. And there is a game plan. There's a very clear plan A, which is much closer to what Townsend was originally successful with. So I think if we stick with that and, as Ian says, just tighten up a few wee things and get a wee bit more savvy, I think it's interesting that both pro teams have had pretty strong years in terms of their line out, their maul and their set piece. So if Scotland can perhaps conquer that and get some consistency there, then they've got the backs to destroy anyone. So that would be the positives for me.
Rory, you can finish us off for the public pod. We've got now an under-20s team that have picked up a trophy this summer. We've got a women's team that are defending the WXV2 trophy. We've got a pro team that are defending the URC championship next season. Is this the sort of culture that means that Scotland men are now in a position that there are people around them that know how to win? Because we've spoken about how important psychologically that is. Is that the last speed bump that we need to get over, do you think, for the senior men's team?
I mean, don't forget about the Calcutta Cup. Our one bit of silverware that we do. I mean, there's all these other Mickey Mouse trophies that they wheel out for the games. You can only hope, really, can't you? I mean, I think it's been quite good on the tour, seeing a few bits of sort of signs of a bit more depth in the squad coming through. Sort of seeing Harry Patterson come through in the Six Nations was kind of heartening, but there wasn't a sense that there was much behind him. I think the tour has maybe shown they're maybe not, there's maybe still a bit of a drop off, but there are more players coming through. Certainly Glasgow's end of season, guys like Kyle Rowe, and obviously the way that Kyle Staines played through the whole season are showing that there are, that it's not just, yes, the first team kind of picks itself if everyone's fit, but there are choices if everyone's not fit. We're still going to have to work out a way to beat Ireland somehow. But then, Glasgow won the URC without having to, having to get past Leinster, and you can't unfortunately do that in the Six Nations. We're gonna have to play them, and we're just gonna have to keep fair. I mean, I think this season Andy Farrell won't be there though, right? Because he'll be on Lions duty.
Yeah.
To be in the Lions,
So this is our prime when he hands the reins over to Rob Howley. Then there's our prime chance to beat them. So we can only hope. I mean, it'd be interesting to see how the autumn goes, because like South Africa are almost as annoying as Ireland, and we've got them obviously as the big kind of side. Plus Dempsey versus his old teams. That could be interesting too.
Yeah, excellent. All right, that is us for the public pod, and indeed for the public pod season. We're going to switch over to Patreon now for an Iain Hay invention. I'm going to ask everybody for a hot, lukewarm, and cold player from Scotland's senior squad from the past 363 days. We will discuss that. Okay. No, I want to hear it for a whole year, so start thinking.
All right,
and we will have a chat. We've asked the Patreons what's been the most annoying thing in rugby this year. So we'll discuss our own choices, we'll discuss our Patreon choices, and we'll have a look at the senior squad, whose stock is rising, who's staying where they are, and who's falling. So if you fancy that, patreon.com/Scottish Rugby Podcast is the place to go. We will keep you furnished there for the next month or so with a little bit of extra content, and we will be back for public pods at the end of August, the start of next year's URC season. From now until then, it's goodbye from me, and it's goodbye from Rory Baldwin.
Goodbye.
Iain Hay.
Cheerio.
And returning Mr. John Anderson.
Mm-hmm.
Just for now.
Make sure you don't delete the YouTube one.
I'm trying not to. Does anybody need a comfort break?
I'm good.
Oh, good, mate. I think Iain has determined he's off for one.
He's comforted himself.
Rory, is it the one with the full logo that I stop, and then the one that's just the ball microphone stays on? Is that right?
Yeah, ball microphone stays on.
YouTube.
Full logo, you